do it.
Yeah, you missed it. The hunting yesterday was epic. Being rainy and gross,
Yeah.
beautiful. Saw more deer than usually. The other day, Thursday, I went out there. There was deer in the parking lot.
Yeah, I heard
A
that.
big bag of salt.
But there was
Somebody dumped like 40 pounds of salt right in the parking lot for some strange reason.
the first hunting day I went out for gun season was dude shot one right in the parking lot with the ranger there.
Really?
He
Well,
parked
technically,
his,
it's still
he
on.
parked his truck, got out, loaded his gun. A buck went running through the parking lot. He looked at the ranger. He looked at the buck. Boom, boom, boom. Dragged it out of the brush and got it right there. And the ranger was like, "Got your tags? All right, you're good."
Hey, I mean, it's all legal. If that doe that was walking out was in perfect bow range, just staring at us sideways, broadside, there was another guy there. And I'm like, 3 days from now, so I ended up grabbing a bag and I loaded up salt and I threw it out there along with some molasses and not a salt lick, but like a compressed grain block. I don't know. First year I've ever tried doing it that way, but I don't know. We'll see.
So I'm going to be smoking salt lift Elizabethan mixture.
Oh, yeah. I will be smoking the Aaron Go Brog pipe tobacco Irish whiskey.
Aaron Go Brog.
That one.
Yeah.
Smoked it before. Stuff is awesome. It actually is.
We actually have a viewer. Who the hell is watching this already?
I don't know. It must be really bored. So, anyways, yeah. What do you want to talk about?
Oh my god, piece of shit.
Today,
I'm getting
the
like
pupil has turned into the master.
I have like this weird draft coming from around the house.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, we're discussing Kavanaugh. Or we were not discussing Kavanaugh, we were discussing Kavanaugh.
I think it's a good place to start. I don't know. What are your views on it? What do you think about it?
Well, I think we should probably explain that you are very
yeah.
right wing.
Yeah, that's very true. I wouldn't necessarily say I lean more right than I do left on most cases. I think the politically correct term would be a libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
But like I was telling you earlier, I think it was last week, I'm fiscally conservative and socially libertarian. Whereas you can do whatever you want to do, but don't expect me to pay for it. And a 30,000 foot view of how I look at things. As far as like the Kavanaugh thing, for instance, because that's been blowing up news. I see so much hypocrisy. I mean, Bill Clinton literally raped a woman and
Became president.
and became president and had a string of scandals after that. Now you have Brett Kavanaugh. Yeah, it's Brett, right? Brad, whatever. Kavanaugh.
It is Brad, right?
I don't know.
Did you see that Pulp Fiction where they spliced in the Kavanaugh hearing with Samuel L. Jackson?
No.
And Brett's like,
Is that on YouTube?
it might be. I saw it.
We'll have to look it up.
I saw it on Instagram. It's pretty funny because it's like Brad, like I went to this school. I have this education. This is my degree. Look at the big brains on Brad.
No, it's just like how I look at this is I want justice. For no matter which way it leans, I want justice, especially if this woman is telling the truth, which there's no indication that she's lying.
Yeah.
or any of the women for that
Mhm.
matter. But it should, if big if he is innocent, should it ruin not only his political career but his life, his family life too? You know, that's why I have such a stipulation with rape claims, because this whole believe women without any evidence, you know, you're guilty until proven innocent type of mentality
Yeah.
is gonna come back to affect essentially every man that lives in this country. You know, I mean, if a woman were to come to you and say that she was raped by you and you've never met her before, or maybe you met her in
Well, the
passing,
burden of evidence is on her.
relies on her,
But-
and that's where, like, do I agree with Kavanaugh or this one? No, I want to see proof. I want to see evidence. If he did in fact do something that was sexually explicit, whether it's rape or sexual assault or whatever, then yeah, I think he should get his balls cut off with gardening shears. But if things come back and you know, this high school party that happened 30 years ago, and he misread the signs and kissed her on, you know, kissed her
that's
when
not
she
that's
didn't
not
want.
even close to the story she
No,
gave.
and I know it's not. I know it's not. I'm hypotheticals here, but I think it's kind of. We were all young and dumb in high school. How many misread signs have you had? No, and I'm not trying to.
This isn't, but it's not about misread signs. And he flat out says she's a liar. There were parties,
Again.
but this never happened at the party. Like, he's 100% denying that he had any involvement with her. There's these other guys that, so the Republicans are trying to say that, well, this is a Democrat scheme to like kill their nominee, which is funny because even Mitch McConnell was like telling Trump, "Don't pick Kavanaugh. Whatever you do, don't pick Kavanaugh." Of course, Trump picks Kavanaugh, right?
Well, because Trump really likes upsetting the balance,
But
and in some cases it works. In some cases it doesn't.
then these guys come out and they're like, "Oh no, we're the ones that raped Ford," and of course, you know, it's not going to be too hard to find a piece of crap in the party who's going to like take a bullet and say like, we're the two guys that were there, we're the ones that did this, because there's the statute of limitations is up. You can have people confess and say, oh no, she's a liar, I was the one that did it, and then they're not going to have any charges pressed against them because of that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he's in the political eye now. You know, I mean, if he was accused of rape and they did actually prove that he did rape this woman or these women, even 30 years, he's done, and his political career is done. And it should be absolutely. Same thing. Like, I mean, Hillary Clinton should have never made it as far as she had with all the scandals that she has. Same thing with Bill Clinton, Bush, and Cheney during.
Oh God.
You know, I mean, look at the list. You have a huge list, and I think identity politics is really what's to blame for these, is because nobody wants to sit down and have the conversation. It doesn't matter what letter you have next to your name when you're running for office. It should be the betterment of this country, period. And what, yeah, okay, sure, yeah, I lean more right, whereas you lean more left.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean, yeah, we did agree on certain things, but it doesn't mean that we still can't find a middle ground and discuss that and make that legislation. If we were in a political, the political world,
Yeah.
which we're not, because so many people have to pick sides, and that's what's killing this country.
Well, so what I see with Kavanaugh is that there's a lot of evidence, at least circumstantial evidence, that is against him. One,
Mhm.
You heard about his best friend in high school who wrote the book about being a drunk partier, and the best friend in the book, he changed names, but basically he like it's almost like he wrote the book misspelling Kavanaugh's name. Like, you can tell who he's talking about in the book. And at the hearing, they even asked Kavanaugh, like, are you so and so in this guy's book? Well, you're going to have to ask him. And of course, nobody decided to have this guy go on the stand and say, "You wrote this book. Is this person described in the book so and so?" Which again is complete fucking incompetence with our system. And the thing is,
Well,
what pisses me off the most about this whole situation. So Obama gets a chance to have a nominee go to the Supreme Court. And Mitch McConnell and all the Republicans refuse to even have a hearing and wait until he's out of office. And that's one of the first things Donald Trump does is put somebody in the Supreme Court, taking Obama's nominee, who clearly should have had his guy at least looked at, right?
oh,
And then you move on in the process and you find somebody else, but the seat gets filled. So you have that level of incompetence. And then
you have a level of incompetence on every aspect of on both parties, on both sides in politics since the Nixon administration. Well, even before that. But yeah, I mean, as far back as Nixon was probably the one that was actually brought to light.
What pisses me off is they're trying to push this guy through so fast.
Mm-hmm.
And what it comes down to is they have to get him in before November, because if they don't vote on it and he doesn't get appointed, they know that there's a very good chance that everything is going to flip for the Democrats, and then anybody that Donald Trump wants to have put in the Supreme Court, not going to happen.
No. Well, and because Donald Trump is such a hated president, and with the rise in identity politics, is you're never going to get anything done when half of the aisle will refuse anything the other half of the aisle has to say, period, just because it's the other half of the aisle. You know, you have Republicans that will come out with an idea, and then the Democrats will just shoot it down without even discussion. And then, you know, same vice versa. Same thing happens on the other side as well. And that's, how are you ever going to be able to push anything through? And when you have Donald Trump, which is such a hated president for good and bad reasons, in my personal opinion.
The last time I remember something actually being pushed through was when the economy was falling apart. Everyone's freaking out. They're like, we need to do something.
Yeah. You know, and then you have Trump, and this is one reason why I like Trump. There's a lot of reasons why I don't like him, and there's other reasons why I do, but he's an upsetter. He pushes people, and in some cases he pushes them a little too far, and he pushes them a little too harsh. But you know, like his Twitter feed. I mean, you read his Twitter feed, and then you can tell, anybody that has any shred of intelligence can see that is simply just to piss people off, just to upset the balance, which is good, but is also, it's a division of this nation. I mean, Obama started it, and Trump isn't doing anything to fix it. He's actually just pushing the divide even further. Except this time, Obama started it with the race, with blacks and whites, and now Trump is pushing it with Democrats and Republicans.
Obama, I feel like, was kind of pushed into that because he was trying to be the president as opposed to the black president. Like he took
But he should have fought against that, and he didn't. He rode that wave. He started. I'll admit,
because when a lot of these like police shootings and stuff started happening, or when the professor, what really pushed him into it was when that professor was arrested for trying to get into his own house. Do you remember that?
No.
Somebody calls and says this guy is next door. He's messing around with this door, and the professor, like he was having trouble with his key or something. It was something with the lock. I forget what the details were. Cops show up, guns drawn, and he's like, "This is my house." And they're like, "Get on the fucking ground!" And then they arrest him, and then they get his information. They're like, "Oh, he was going into his own house," and it became this big deal about how he was stereotyped because he's a black man going into a house in an upscale neighborhood. Therefore, he doesn't belong there, and they send the cops out.
But that's not the president's fault. That's that particular
It's not, but
police department's
he
fault.
got dragged into it because that was when he uh, had the officer who arrested the guy and the professor at the White House to try to like, and they're sharing beers out on the patio to like try to smooth the whole thing over, and he got a lot of criticism for that. For like, really, that's how you're gonna handle it?
But I mean, when you're, I don't know, when you're a leader, you need to expect criticism. You need to be able to do the one thing that everybody else doesn't want you to do. As the first black president, he should have done, in my opinion, he should have done more to unify this nation instead of pointing out all of its flaws. Yeah, and I will admit there are still racism, there is still sexism, there is still a lot of social problems in this country that has to resolves around essentially, you know, African Americans. However, it's it's the end of 2018 now.
Yeah.
You know, everybody has the same pathway, the same doors are open. I mean, I grew up in the inner city. I'm as white as they come. Now I'm an IT guy at a hospital.
Right.
You know, and I work under a couple of very prominent African Americans that are by far more intelligent than me, and they're managers, and they do great things. Now, is that my fault that they're there? No, that's their fault. They worked hard to get there. Now,
should two white guys really be talking about this? or why can't we?
Why can't we?
Yeah, that's true.
Why can't we? We're giving our opinion. I'm not racist in any way, shape, or form. I have, you know, and this is the proverbial white man not racist comment. But I have black friends. I talk to them about this all the time, and it boils down to, I don't care about the color of your skin. It boils down to how hard are you willing to work for what you want.
I think this is
and that's across the board, no matter what your skin color is. If you want to make $1 million a year, live in a fancy house, and drive a fancy car, then you can work to do that. But why should I be responsible to provide those things for you?
Well, here's where I think me and you both agree is that, so I don't like identity politics
Not at all.
So I think that's where the Democrats who try to say that we're unifying the country, it's like, okay, then why are you picking these groups? And why are you saying that they're disenfranchised? And why are you basically setting groups against each other? Well, these people are oppressing me, and these people are oppressing them.
But in a free nation.
And then what it comes down to is they keep talking about how there's white privilege, but when you look at all the charts, the Asians are kicking everyone's ass.
Absolutely.
To the point where they have to sue to get into Harvard.
Well, you have Asians that are excelling in the knowledge-based realm of things, mathematics and science and the STEM fields. Then you have the Indians that are excelling in store ownership, gas stations and what have you, which is a very lucrative. I'm not trying to talk down on anybody, but I mean, if you own a gas station, you're doing pretty well for yourself. Yeah, you're not living in a fancy upscale neighborhood, but you own your own business, you make your own hours, you are living the American dream.
Well, it's not just the Indians or Pakistanis or Koreans and other communities. What they have going for them is the fact that their communities back them. So
absolutely,
you have a family member who's able to come to America and get a green card or citizenship, but then the families back in the homeland are like sending them money to start these businesses, to establish themselves here. So you have that financial backing, and you also have where was it? Was it New York? There's one bank in particular that worked for Chinatown, right? It's basically like you have these immigrants coming in, they don't speak English, they can't go to a normal bank and open an account or anything. So that community themselves opened their own bank and were doing loans and everything. They ended up getting, the one in particular I'm talking about got busted, but still, you have like good examples of this happening where these communities work for themselves and they promote themselves and they get themselves up and running and actually contribute to their group and everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't see that with other groups. And
But that's why they're excelling. The same thing. I mean, like look at the Asians. For lack of a better term, I guess. But like education is huge for them. They're forced. They're very not forced. They're persuaded at a very young age to get a good education, to excel in
they're talking
whatever
about
field
they're
they
talking
choose.
about college with their kids before they're even in kindergarten. It's like you're going to go to Harvard.
Exactly. So they push their children to get a good education, and in the Asian societies, they have like in the Asian society, if you want to become a gangbanger, you're looked down upon.
But that's also a trap that they also get caught in. Like the girls go to college, and a lot of Asian guys end up in street gangs, depending on city and where they're growing up. But
they're looked down upon now. Even in my circle, to sit there and say, yeah, I'm gonna go to college and get a better education in X field, whatever it may be. A lot of people might be like, yeah, I don't see you doing that. African American communities doing the same exact thing. That's not necessarily the fault of the individual. It's the fault of the society that we have created for ourselves. Hang around. Essentially, what I'm saying is hang around people that are willing to push you to greatness. And in this society, the freest nation that we have, we can do that. We're slowly losing those freedoms, but as of right now,
really, dude, really,
all right,
really,
what? Woman's not feeling well. She texted me. I didn't know what she wanted. She's fine. She'll live.
Yeah.
No, I see, this nation, and it's slowly eroding. It's asking for its freedoms to slowly be eroded. And that's where regulation to a point is good, but regulation to another point can be detrimental. Especially with businesses and
that sounded kind of like an oxymoron there, because you're like, we're asking for our freedoms to be eroded, and then you're saying regulation is good.
Regulation to a point. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if I were to sit here and say there's zero regulate EPA, the EPA is gone, so you can do whatever you want. You can dump whatever you want into our river systems. That's bad. That's horrible. So we need to be able to regulate that to a point. However, we can't sit there and expect these starter companies to, dump billions of dollars to have a clean system. That's a horrible example, but because we should. But what I'm saying, what I'm getting at is we need intelligent people in that field to make the regulations. We can't have.
I think they're coming after us.
Yes.
No, it's Mark here. Yeah.
No, what with politics today is we have lawyers and businessmen making decisions about our climate. They don't know anything about it. I mean, technically, I went to school for computer science, so I guess you can very loosely call me a scientist. However, do I know anything about climate scientifically? Not in the least. So I'm not going to sit there and try to even determine it.
Well, I don't know if you. Okay, definition-wise, I don't think you would qualify as a scientist. You're
Definition-wise, probably not.
You're not writing papers. You're not doing.
But
like,
what is my position.
You'd be a technician. So you
working underneath
know
one
the
of those.
science. You're using the
Yes.
science that other people have figured out,
Yes.
but you're not
I
creating.
could sit here and read the numbers to you all day. I can Google the numbers
Toscano,
all day.
Potaro, from Tuscany. I'm not even gonna. Can't speak Italian. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. All I know is they make some good stuff.
All I'm saying is I'm not going to sit here and try to tell somebody how to live their life, and what, or I'm not going to sit here and try to tell a group of people, how the climate is going when I know next to nothing. I've never created a study on it.
But you have the studies that you can read and understand.
I do, but I haven't done any of the studies myself. I can sit here and I can recite
But
numbers
there's
to you
other
all day.
scientists, because there's peer-reviewed studies
Exactly.
that say, hey, this guy figured out this. And then you have 20 other people who do the same experiment to see if they get the same results. And they do. Therefore, they're like, hey, this study is valid. Here's our studies.
How would you determine though if those studies are real? Because how many studies do you come out
That's the whole
that
point of
5 years later?
peer review. And,
True.
But here's, okay.
But look at
so-
the amount of studies that we've based our regulations and our laws on
Mhm.
that come to find out years later are false. Look at the marijuana claims.
Well, there was no studies done on marijuana.
There was hundreds of studies done on marijuana back in
No.
the 1900s,
No.
and then people decided to throw
There
it.
was zero scientific studies done on marijuana. And after it was made illegal, you couldn't do scientific studies on it because to
It
do
was
that,
illegal.
you're breaking the law.
Yeah.
So, like, the only thing we really have to go on with marijuana right now is what Canada is in the middle of doing, which Canada authorized studies on the effects, side effects, positive, negative. There's another country that just legalized doing studies on the effects of marijuana. But before that, nothing. There's nothing out there. The same thing with steroids. Steroid use, our government knows that there's a positive side effect on steroids because everybody before the 1980s was using steroids to go to the Olympics.
Mhm.
And we know that to be a fact now.
Mm-hmm.
And so they know the positive side effects of it. But the negative, like roid rage and all that shit that came out during the 80s, that was all made up for propaganda.
Well, same thing with what was it? Marijuana. I think it was back in the 20s that if you smoked marijuana, it would make black men want to rape white women.
Yeah, propaganda.
Oh, absolutely. But look at the amount of propaganda that's out there today for climate change on both sides. Look at Al Gore. 30 years ago, we were supposed to be on fire right now.
Well, here's the other thing with a lot of those studies, is that you have some studies that were put out by the oil industry. So what are they going to tell these scientists to do? It's like, hey, we need something that is in favor of the scientists are getting a paycheck. Those scientists,
Mhm.
and they're not good scientists. You have to have non-biased studies that are done that are funded without an agenda.
That are bipartisan from both sides and not receiving any money from government subsidies.
Well, you would hope that if you're getting government money to do a study, that they're not going to try to lean one way or the other. It's like a lot of the studies that were done on and this was in a recent 4-hour Joe Rogan podcast where they were discussing veganism or eating meat.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one guy that kept going back to like 1970 studies. And at one point he said, when they started promoting cheese, what happened was you had all these companies that are in the cheese and dairy industry. They get together and they're like, we need to have something that says milk and dairy is good for you. So all of a sudden they're coming out with their own studies. Well, of course, those studies are going to be biased as to the
Absolutely.
industry. And we also have, when it comes to food, we didn't really have any studies done. What you had was the Department of Agriculture, who should not be involved in health whatsoever because they're not doctors, they're not dietitians. The whole point of the Department of Agriculture is to promote the grains that the government subsidize. And what do you have with the pyramid scheme? Well, which they, not pyramid scheme, the pyramid food chart is that, oh,
Which
grains,
is essentially a pyramid scheme.
which is a pyramid scheme. Yeah, overall, is grains are supposed to be like the foundation of the American diet. And what happened after that? Oh, diabetes, heart disease skyrocketed after that, which should be a study done, but instead you have this agenda.
But see, now, because, and I don't want to say
And then it
brainwash.
gets pushed into the schools where, like, you take your health
Oh.
studies class, and they're like, "Oh yeah, all this shitty food that's going to end up killing you." that's what it should be the basis of your diet.
I don't want to say brainwashed for the American public in in its entirety. It's normalcy. I think that's the right word. Where like macaroni and cheese, cracked macaroni and cheese,
Garbage.
is like the normal like staple to feed our children. Like,
Yeah.
that's where like 90% of the children, I don't want to say were raised on it, but have eaten it on a fairly regular basis
That tastes
in their
good.
life in the last 30 years. Anything that's powdered cheese is not good for you.
It's not cheese.
But see, the vast majority of people, and the vast majority of people know that it's not good for you, but they'll eat it anyway. They'll go get a Little Caesars pizza.
I don't know about that because, like, I remember growing up. Of course, this was the '80s,
Well,
right?
And yeah, I mean, a lot has changed in
and
the
it's-
last 20 years.
And it's like, okay, I'm growing up, and my mom is telling me, and this isn't my mom's fault. This is what she was growing up during the '70s hearing, is that, and keep in mind that my mom was also on. We were getting like WIC and food stamps and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, so is my
So the government is pushing, like, we got the big block, basically,
Velveeta cheese.
basically like generic Velveeta cheese,
Yep.
which you read the ingredients, there's not even 1% of it is really cheese.
Anything that never
And they're
that
saying-
bugs don't even want to eat
And they're saying,
is horrible.
and they're also like, oh, well, you can get hot dogs, and you can get this, and you can get, like, I think skim milk was declared to be like better than whole milk.
But that
and
comes
it's like
down
skim milk is just for the flavoring. They dump a ton of sugar into it.
But that comes down to price. What's cheaper, healthy food or generic
but,
food that's horrible for
but
you?
if your mission is to have a healthy population, why would you dump all the shit on the poor people? If that's going to be,
Because that's not that was okay. I think it was FDR. I'm not 100% sure. Wanted every American in this nation to have an acre of land so that they can have their own farms and produce their own meals.
I never heard that.
I think it was FDR that wanted that. I'm not. Don't quote me. I'm not sure. But
We need to have what's his name from Rogan?
yeah, we need to have Jamie
Jamie.
on.
Jamie, look that up.
Because I'm
See
not.
if that's true.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure. And this was something that I heard a while ago. I could be completely wrong on this, but either way, like you have enough here between here and your backyard if you tore up your patio to produce at least maybe not entirely everything that you need, but a substantial portion to substitute your or not substitute, but to subsidize your diet. And I think a lot of people have lost that in the last 50 years because I mean my grandparents, my grandfather had chickens. He had a farm all the way up until the day he had
I
to move
know
into
that's
retirement.
possible where I used to live because I've done here. It's not a possibility. Like there's too much shade with the tree. The backyard is way
But
too
if you
freaking small.
had an entire society that wanted to live healthy, and that's a big problem because the vast majority of people today know that Velveeta cheese is horrible for you, yet they still buy it by the billions of tons every year. Salt is is good for you in minute amounts. However,
Too much
how-
salt is bad for you.
too much salt
Yeah.
can actually kill you. Yet everything has a sodium content of. If you go out, walk into the supermarket, you buy a can of soup, chunky soup.
Yeah, because it extends
Sodium,
the life of
sodium
shelf
is
life.
like 30, 40, even 50%. That is not healthy. Yet people will still buy it. Now, people know that it's not healthy. The vast majority, I'm not saying everybody, but the vast majority of people that go to the store know that. However, there's two things that are playing a part of that. One is we live in a busy society nowadays to where we feel we don't have the time to either grow our own crops or what have you. And secondly is financial. What's cheaper? 4 frozen donut or 4 frozen pizzas or fruit salad?
Well,
You know,
you also have a lot of people who are becoming addicted or are addicted to, well, why would I cook a meal at home when I can just go through the McDonald's drive-in?
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, look at McDonald's has been proven time and time and time again to be one of the worst fast food chains on the planet. There's like 90 billion of them out there, and people
Worse
still
for, like, how would you define worse?
health-wise. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
nothing on their menu is healthy. Their salads are horrible for you.
And yet they're like the biggest landowners besides the Vatican.
Exactly. You know, and then you have Taco Bell, which will actually buy.
The ladies' man himself, Ryan S. Hello, Typing Piper and Friends.
Oh, it went away. Anyways, hi.
Hi, thank you
don't know
for
you.
watching.
This is his channel.
Did you even introduce yourself?
No, I didn't.
Do you want a screen name, or are you going to use like just?
I don't know. I have a YouTube channel, but I've never done anything with it. So.
That's like 90% of YouTube.
Yeah. Well, anyways, the name's Ben. I'm not gonna give you my last name for the creepers that are out there. I'm in Michigan. Known this guy for a while. I have a YouTube channel, but like I just said, I don't have anything on it. You can look me up, but I don't know what you're gonna find. Blank page. That's Redneck Obsession. I'm a massive outdoorsman. I would much rather be hunting or fishing than doing just about anything else. I just haven't found $100 billion underneath my mattress for me to afford to do that. So here I am. Anyways, cheers to you. Anyways, what the hell were we talking about again? Oh,
Food, McDonald's, yeah.
Taco Bell. This was something I read. This was quite a few years ago, but Taco Bell actually we're doing this outside, so people are driving by.
As you can tell,
Yeah,
that is the guy with a tiny dick.
Yeah, it's true. Don't tell my fiance that though.
No, I'm talking about the guy in the truck.
Oh, I thought you said Ben had a tiny dick. No, well, I
You
mean
just
that's
admitted on a
true,
live
too.
feed that you.
I don't even care. I don't care. It's
God.
true. It's the truth. I'd show it, but the children watching would be offended. Anyways, Taco Bell. This was a study I read quite a few years ago, but Taco Bell admitted to paying the fine from the FDA because it's cheaper than fixing their meat. Because their meat was less than like 30% of like real meat. Now
Isn't
I don't
it
know if that's
basically,
still
like,
true today.
Dog
but
food grade.
I think so.
Yeah.
But how many? I ate at Taco Bell this week. Now that's I know what I'm eating isn't good for me, but I mean when you're working, and you got an hour for lunch, and you got to go home, and you got to let the dog out, or you got to take care of the kid, or you got to do something else. Speed and convenience over nutritional value. I mean,
We have 3 viewers. What the
Look
heck?
at that.
Okay.
Hi,
what do you-
guys.
Who else thinks capitalism is going to collapse in our lifetime? Maybe we should consider socialism instead. Do we have a Chinese? Is that Chinese? Are you Korean? I see a blue star on there.
No, I will admit that capitalism has hit its peak in this country, and this is my own opinion. I have zero studies backing it. Whatever. This is just what I've seen over the years. And my own,
Unregulated capitalism.
to a point, yes. Is capitalism having?
Whoa, I can't even read that. It means master poster.
Hmm.
Master poster.
All right. Well,
Nice
how you
to
doing?
meet you.
I would like to give you my opinion of your comment. Capitalism is failing. And like what he said, unregulated capitalism isn't going to sustain itself. We've seen it. Is there something else that we can look at? Absolutely. Is socialism the answer? Absolutely not. The only reason being is because, well, point me one example of socialism that has worked. I'll wait.
Well,
Yeah.
apparently it's going well for them. So
Well,
and
where in China?
well, okay. So and
Because China's actually switched over to capitalism, and now their economy is screaming.
they're both. So
They are both,
they are both.
and I can
this
see
is,
us.
And this is the argument I'm going to make. So seen it here before is that what I think we need is an actual balance between the two. And it's kind of like the balance between the left and the right. You need the left and the right.
Absolutely.
So they both correct each other, right? So the left is the ones that come up with the great ideas, and then the right is the ones that take those ideas and actually push them. It's kind of like a company, right?
Mhm.
So you have the person who creates the company. Now that innovator, the person with the great idea, tends to be left leaning. But then in order to run the company, keep everything going, you have to have the right side, the conservative,
doers.
yeah,
The
the conservative people that
I don't even really want to say doers because that's not. I get where you're coming from.
yeah. So anyways, you have to have both, and I think for us, and we're surrounded by socialism in this country, and yet we don't. Most people don't even realize it, or you point it out to them, and they try to scream some type of like conspiracy theory or whatever. But for example,
We have social programs. We have a lot of social
no,
programs.
I'm not even talking about those. I'm talking about, and for example, that squirrel stew that you have cooking up in there
Smells delicious.
yeah. Well, that's a product of socialism because you have public hunting land that is by the public that anybody can use, and that's a socialist project
Through taxes.
through taxes.
Mhm.
You also have health insurance. That's a socialist program. The roads that you drive on is a socialist program. You have all these socialist things that really kind of build the infrastructure and the foundation of this country. But how far do you highway if it wasn't for things like if you were to privatize all the land in this country,
It would be ruined.
it would be ruined. Yeah, you wouldn't have a place to go hunt unless you own the land. You wouldn't be able.
I don't have the money to buy land.
A lot of the cities in this country wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the interstate highway system, because that created trucking, it created jobs, it created more
I agree
expansion
with
and
you. I agree with you
infrastructure.
100%.
Yeah,
But where does that end? Now let's say okay, I agree with you, and all of those things have worked to a point. But let's say okay, you make $30,000 a year, your neighbor makes $15,000 a year. Now should you give $10,000 to him so you guys make equal amounts, even though he only works 20 hours a week and you work 40?
well, equals one of those things that I don't agree with. That's flat out communism right there.
Mhm.
Which communism also will beat down anybody who tries to make more than anybody else, which is a horrible idea because
And-
then you're preventing anybody from trying to better their own lives because everybody should be equal. Well, what ends up happening is you have a few oligarchs and people who are in power who are eating caviar and drinking the most expensive vodka in the world,
Now,
and then you have everyone else who's flat out freaking poor.
100 years ago, that inequality wasn't as noticeable. Yeah, you had a few oligarchs, you had the Rockefellers, and you had the people that went big, and some were they got it honestly, some got it ruthlessly, and ruined a lot of people in the process. But nowadays, you have more people that are
Insinuate socialists are going to try to, regardless of how hard they work. Huh?
what was that? I didn't read it. I couldn't read it. I'm sorry.
We're insinuating that socialists would. Disingenuous of a comment. Oh. Well, that's kind of what we've seen with other countries, and
Yeah, I mean, we have to look at the broad spectrum here. We can, yeah, sure. If somebody were to come to me and tell me that I would have to work 30 hours a week and I could be given everything that I wanted and needed, and everything would be happy hunky dory. All right, sure, absolutely, I would be all about that. That's what socialism sells, but it never stops there. Look at any socialist country that's out there that has existed, that is, risen and fallen, that's still in existence today. They're horrible countries. They
that's not
are
true,
shitholes.
That's not true, though. Because if you look at the Scandinavian countries, a lot of their
They're
programs are
not
socialist.
socialist. Their
They are, though.
their prime minister even said, "Stop using us." Denmark's president, said, "Don't use us as a socialist country because we're not socialist." Yeah, they have socialist programs just like us, but they still
That's a
have
good point.
they have more free market than we do. What?
He was saying, like, where does privatization end?
And that is something
And that's where I push for the balance between the two.
That's where I agree with you on that. Especially in today's day and age. I completely agree with who was that?
How about primary and secondary education?
How about education?
I think I saw something about Medicare too, which is another socialist program.
Which is very much a socialist program.
Yeah,
But
a
as
lot
far
of
as
people depend on
okay,
it.
let's go back to the education standpoint. I agree with the K through 12, the primary education. That should be free, or at least free and private. I'm just kind of like how the system is today. I think it needs to be relooked at. The Federal Department of Education has been throwing money at the education system for the past 30 years, and all we're seeing is our test scores drop. Now
They're testing
not
too much.
and
Common
that's
Core is a piece of shit.
Common Core is horrible, but that's when we need to really start thinking about these different avenues of approach for education. We really need to look at the Asian communities because obviously they have the best education in the world.
No, they don't. They're using our education. It's the culture that's pushing it.
Well, and
And
a lot of it is intertwined.
so,
a lot of
well,
it is very much intertwined.
so
But
like-
that's where you have a problem with
For example,
government agencies.
I do have a story on that. So, one example is I like to listen to the David Chang podcast. Cook, he has the Momofuku restaurant chain.
You know what? You mentioned him, and I haven't looked.
Yeah.
I haven't
So-
looked into him. I've been lazy.
So anyways,
I'm sorry.
he has a lot of Asian American people who are prominent in their fields on his podcast. And one podcast in particular, they're talking about how when it comes to the parents, they
I totally spilled that all over your porch. I'm sorry.
have a broom. So when it comes to the parents, so one guy in particular was like, I want to be an artist. I think it was artist. Maybe he was a chef. I don't know. But the point is, he didn't want to go into a STEM field. So, and his mom was like, no, you want to go into science. Oh, I think it was like literature, now that I think about it. Because they're like, don't take literature because if the teacher doesn't like you, they can just give you a bad grade. If you go into math or science, the answer is the answer,
There's
and
proof.
you get your A,
Mhm.
right? Which you don't hear that with a lot of the other cultures here. And that's where these immigrants, they come in and they focus and they know where they can win and where they can lose. So they direct the kids in a way that they're going to be successful no matter who steps in and says you're not worthy.
However, and this is I'm gonna throw a social conundrum in there with you. Is I agree with you 100%. Statistically speaking, if I were to look at the statistics, a mathematician is going to make more money and is going to be quote unquote more successful than a writer, statistically speaking. However, it should be your choice. But where you have, that's where you have to weigh your options. Like, yeah, I would me personally, I would love to be able to sit down and write full time and go hunting and fishing and make millions of dollars.
But that's how
But that's
they've
not
but that's how they figured out, like with our school system. And this is where there's the big difference. So you have the social agenda of like all these uh, the
but see that's
you have
where
all these groups, right? And you have the liberals coming out and trying to say that like they're being oppressed, they're being oppressed, they're being oppressed, right? But really, the success in this country comes from the individual, and it's always
Absolutely.
been based on the individual, and that's what the Enlightenment was about.
absolutely
It wasn't about whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're black or white. It's that every individual has the same opportunities, and that's
Yep.
what the whole country is supposed to be based around. And instead, what you have is these groups that are claiming to be oppressed. And if they just looked at themselves as an individual, which the successful ones in those groups are like, I'm not failing, instead of saying, like, why are all X group failing?
Mm-hmm.
You can't fix an entire group of people, but you can fix yourself.
But see, that's where the government fails because they have to look at numbers. They have to look at the statistics from coast to coast, and they say, well, X group is failing in this overall. However, you're always going to have those outliers.
And when
So-
it comes down to,
But you have hold on. You have an entire culture. Now, getting back to the primary and the secondary education system. The primary education system, the K through 12 that we have in this country,
sucks.
is horrible. Horrible. Totally agree with you. And that's where we need to but in certain regions may work better than others. So you have to let
But
the
that
states,
also,
the cities, the counties decide on how they want their school systems to be run.
no, because
So you're going to let the federal government decide across the board from coast to coast
okay,
how to teach
the main
students.
issue is, so it's how we fund our schools, and how we fund our schools is complete bullshit because it goes by property tax.
Welcome to the Federal Department of Education.
That's state. It's state run.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on the state, but every state does the same thing. Well, except for a few. There are a few states that did change it, where it's no longer property tax funding the schools. So
Wait a minute. No, the
Factory-
Federal Department of Education is federal.
it's the Department of Education. They set the standards for said federal funds to go to these schools, but the primary funding is dependent on the state. And the state says locally, the property tax is what's going to fund the schools. So, for example, Kalamazoo, this is where I'm from. We had paper mill. You had all these people making really good money.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, all the property values up. Everybody's living in good neighborhoods. Paper mill closes. People move away. They lose their jobs. a lot of the majority of the housing ends up becoming rental property. This one's really good. I haven't had that experience with that.
Yeah, this is the rich vanilla.
Yeah,
It's actually tastes pretty good too. Anyways,
nice room though. So, what you have is property value goes down, less money goes to the schools, the kids are having shittier quality textbooks, they're not getting computers like the wealthier neighborhoods, they're not getting all the advantages, right? So, why is it an area that should have better education offered to them so that they can create jobs, create more business opportunities, up the value of the neighborhood? Why is it that it's basically like this downward spiral? Once the jobs go away and the real estate value goes down, the schools go to shit, the kids aren't getting the education that they need to improve their circumstances.
because now you're talking about toilet bowl in essence, in the fact that you're right. Okay, so let's use this city as an example. Paper mills close, cities property taxes plummet. Okay, which I don't agree with property taxes at all, but I'll get to that in a minute. However, so the main mill closes, the city goes under, education system goes under, and now you have a city of welfare recipients, of people that feel that they're disingenuous or disingenuized. Disenfranchised. Yes, thank you. My English is not so good. Shut up.
Oh my God.
So you have the toilet bowl effect, where things shit just rolls downhill.
Yeah.
However, you have, and then you see crime spike. I mean, wherever you have low education is where you have the highest crime, and mainly inner cities. Inner city Detroit, inner city Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. So yeah, you're right. We should probably look into funding these in another way.
Yeah.
Is it that? No.
Especially with who we have in
So in that instance, and this is where.
What decade are you living in? Social belong to inner cities are safer than they've ever been.
I don't know what inner city you're from.
In the 90s.
I don't know what inner city you guys
actually
are from, but
the crime spike was in the 70s and it's gone down ever since.
But you still can't tell me that rural, that say Schaumburg, which is about a half hour north of Chicago, is any worse off than inner city Chicago, where I think they had 63 murders last weekend, or shootings maybe. Yeah, shootings. Yeah. So inner cities are worse off financially, stability wise, as far as just about everything. Their infrastructure is horrible. Look at Detroit, for crying out loud. We live 2.5 hours away from Detroit. We see it. We read about it on the news.
Chicago.
Unique to Chicago. No, that's a pretty broad statistic.
Baltimore is pretty shitty too.
I mean, you have inner city of Phillies.
St. Louis is like crumbling.
Yeah, and that's because their infrastructure is failing. When you take the main look at Detroit. Detroit was the hubbub of the nation when GM and Chrysler and Ford and all them were there, and then they all moved. They all moved outside of Detroit. 90% of them all moved across the ocean, and Detroit plummeted. Now you have if you ever kill anybody, take them to Detroit, because there's a 70% chance you won't get caught. That's a statistic.
Or just look act like Snoop and I forget the other guy's name from The Wire.
The bottom line, the best way and the fastest way to revitalize a particular city is through your education system. You can fix it, in my personal belief, you can fix a city in one generation if you have the proper education.
One generation?
I can see it. I have hope for that. I mean,
10,
that's
20 years is what you're saying?
yeah.
Because they've been trying to fix downtown Kalamazoo for like the last 20 years, and all I see is them backtracking now.
Mm-hmm. Well, look at, but that's also too with you have. I haven't. I don't know. That's. I've only lived here for 6 years. I don't really have the.
Flying Dutchman, corn dog.
Ooh, I almost bought a corn cob plate the other day.
They don't make these anymore.
No, I'm
No.
gonna have to steal it from you when you're not looking there. But I don't know. It's a
Hi.
hello.
Hi. Oh,
Yes.
I'm sorry to bother you.
No.
With the Kalamazoo County Democrats?
That is all you.
Yeah.
A specific for Sarah Pagels.
Well, she's not home. She lives here.
Okay.
You want to answer a question? You know, I mean, these are just.
Are you guys planning on voting in November?
I am.
I was.
Okay. Okay. We have some literature. Do you have a couple minutes to answer like 4 questions?
Are they yes and no?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So, as I said, my name's Rhonda, this is Chuck, and we're out walking for the Kalamazoo County Democrats because we're concerned about the direction of our country
Mm-hmm.
and the big election in November.
Mhm,
That's
mhm.
upcoming. So, what would you say the most important issue is to you and your family right
World War III.
I wouldn't necessarily go that far. I would say
Civil War or possibly?
we'll never get that
we're
bad.
too fat and lazy for a Civil War.
Yeah. I would say our education system.
Education?
Yes,
Okay.
Perfect.
because we were just talking about that actually.
Yeah, we're-
now? And you guys sound like educated citizens. Can we count on your vote for Gretchen Whitmer for governor?
yes.
I'm not gonna say yes or no because I haven't read up on her, so I'm not.
I went to high school with Bill Schuette. He's not a whole lot different than the guy who got run from the street court. I could tell you some horror stories.
Okay.
Very wealthy family.
Okay.
But whatever. I mean, you know. So you're undecided, but you are not.
I'm not.
And you,
He's
you
gonna
live
vote.
here, right?
He's gonna
Yes.
vote for Gretchen.
Okay.
Do you know who you're supporting for state senate?
I do not.
Who is running for that?
McCann on the Democrats.
Sean McCann.
Sean McCann.
He lost by 67.
62 votes.
He was a Kalamazoo City commissioner, right?
No.
Yeah.
He was?
Give him the.
Oh yes, he actually stopped by my house the other day.
He's
Well,
a very
your house.
cool guy.
This guy?
Yes,
Cool guy.
but I was right in the middle. And I did not have a chance to sit down and talk to him. I was actually kind of really felt bad
Okay.
after the fact. Oops.
But I mean, they're not going to have straight. You know, they've eliminated straight ticket.
Yeah, I heard that and I thought it was a bunch of crap.
It
But
is. But there is a proposal. You know, proposal 3 on the ballot is that, among other things, is going to reform that. One of the things they're going to put back in. You know, it's going to be basically it's a referendum. And if they do it, it'll be back in. But yeah, that's kind of crazy because all the older people, their dad's 85, is going to do absentee ballot and guarantee he's not going to be able to figure out how to do it normally.
yeah.
Yeah.
But do you think you're going to support this guy?
Sean McCann.
There's no other Democrat. You're going to do that, or he's running again.
He's running in Margaret O'Brien.
Margaret O'Brien.
Well, I guess let me ask you this. I lean more. However, I hate the identity politics. So what does he stand for? I mean, I'll vote D or R. I don't care. I do for me and my community is really what I'm.
Well, it says here, strengthen public schools, higher education institutions, reform partisan gerrymandering, minimum wage, expand healthy Michigan, and improve public transportation.
That's a 30,000-foot view, though. You got to get more detail than
Well, he can only do so much.
that. I totally agree. But I've also read too that in the last 4 years that he was in the Senate, correct?
Sean he was not elected last time.
He lost
He
last
ran,
time.
but he didn't.
He ran. Okay.
This is state senate.
Yeah,
So he's gonna have a hard time with any of this in the state senate as long as
Okay.
it's hard.
controlled by the
What was he
Republicans.
beforehand?
The local,
He was a
City commissioner.
Yeah.
City commissioner.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Because I did read. Now I don't know if this is true, but in the last 4 years that he was only able to pass one regulation, or that he only managed to get one passed
in Kalamazoo.
in Kalamazoo.
That's not a surprise if you know our city commission, especially when what
Yeah.
No, and that's where I'm
I'm
asking
not
the
too
question.
happy with that.
our city commission decreed, and I've never gone to a city commission meeting in my life, but we're gonna go to the next couple because what I've discovered is they can basically they'll tell the police to do whatever they want. I mean, whether you like what went on in Bronson Park or not, which it was the encampment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, it was there to raise a point. You know, why can't the
because-
city put money into
Right.
low cost housing for these people? And he, out of the blue, on Wednesday, announced, got hold of the police and said, "We give you authority to go completely." They threw everything away. They put everything in a dumpster. All
Yep.
those people had donations. They threw everything away.
I heard about that.
So, what I don't understand is how the city commission has that kind of power. I mean, what if they can do that? They can do anything. They could say you can't smoke pipe out on your porch to the police. The
Mhm.
police come by if they see you smoking tobacco on your porch because it's outside.
Sounds to me like they got too much power.
They're elected, which means they're supposed to have a constituency.
But they also made it harder for anybody to actually run for those positions as well.
Really, Mouse? Can I let her out?
Yeah.
Okay.
She just had a bunch of surgery, teeth
Oh, yeah.
removed.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
She's an old pup.
She doesn't feel.
She's got
all the way.
Yeah,
14.
Is she really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
She does not like my 10-week-old puppy. That is for sure.
I'm actually going to close that door.
So, Sean McCann had education first, though.
Okay.
So
Good.
this is-
And that's something that I don't have any children, but with everything that's been going on,
Yeah.
Who do you,
You
want
know,
to work with in
federally-
20 years?
Yeah.
what's that?
What kind of people do you want to work with in 20 years?
Exactly. And the people that I've met that are younger than me, and I'm only 29, be 29 in a month, scare the crap out of me. So,
Yeah, I know.
Hey,
I mean,
what about, we don't have any kids either. We live in the city. So we pay
Mhm.
property taxes,
Mhm.
money of which go or should be going to public education.
Mhm.
And for that reason, other than, we should have, the smarter the kids are as they get done with school, the better off everybody is.
Mhm.
But if we're putting money into the schools, it seems to me that we ought to be able to have high quality education.
Absolutely.
Especially, K-12.
Absolutely.
Higher ed is a different story. That's funding supposed to come out of the state, which of course they dropped that, down to about 16%.
Yeah.
And you know, the kids, I work with us, I just retired, but these kids that are going to college are spending.
crazy.
It's crazy. I don't know I don't know what it is, but when I went to Western, it was $35 a credit hour. I think now
Yeah.
it's around $240 a credit hour.
Hmm. And that's a failure on, I think, multiple people's parts, in the fact that depending on what you go to school for, and the fact when the government gives you money, if you're a private organization and you know that your customers are going to pay whatever you ask, then yeah, any sane business person is going to raise their prices. So that's where.
But there's also greed involved too. 'Cause
Well,
you
there's
have
there's a ton of, but
the
business
business these
is greed.
universities making 7 figures as opposed to like
Yeah.
100,000 a year, which was good back in the day,
Well, yeah, absolutely. But when you're making 60, 70,000 or $100,000 off of
and they don't
per
pay their
student,
professors shit.
Well,
No.
Here's the deal. A full professor makes about $170,000 a year.
If they make it,
If they,
because if they're
it's
part time,
about if you're part time, you're screwed. But if you're a full time, non tenured professor, you make, or an associate, non tenured associate professor, you make about 80 to 90,000 a year.
Okay.
And
that's a
they have to have a
very much
PhD.
reasonable.
Well, they have to have PhD. They don't hire non-PhDs.
Yeah.
Unless they hire them for adjuncts or temps.
how I look, and that's as far as upper education goes. I definitely agree with privatization because I think you should pay for it. I mean, I went to college, and I got to pay for it. I'm
Yeah.
paying for it every month.
Yeah.
But I went to school for computer science.
Yeah.
You know, if I went to school for gender studies or something like that, and then expect to make a six-figure salary
Right.
outside of it, that's my own fault / stupidity, in my opinion.
Right. But everybody can't be an engineer or assistant a programmer. That's-
Absolutely.
I mean,
And that, but you have to understand where your strengths and weaknesses come from.
So, can we
yeah. Go
Yes,
ahead. Go
yes.
ahead.
get a couple more here?
You know who John Hoadley is?
yeah,
He's running for state house.
Mhm.
I don't know that much about him. You know, I know that we need more Democrats in the House because it's strongly Republican.
he was pushing for keeping guns out of the schools because there was a loophole.
He's a
Or
very good guy.
Or letting college students carry.
He was trying to basically make schools a gun-free zone because in Michigan there was that loophole that if you have a concealed pistol license and all these other, like, basically it was kind of like a fair game with that. And
Don't even get me started.
Sorry.
and that all started after somebody went to the public library open carrying, and like people were freaking out, and the cops showed up, and the cops were like,
Anything about it.
and
Yeah.
State's an open carry regulation state.
yeah,
But a university an institution can make their own rules. So, that's what Western does.
Are you
Mhm.
marking these
I
down?
marked it. Yeah. So, anyway,
Do you think you'll vote for John Hoadley?
I'd probably vote for him.
could be a really neat.
Yeah,
So it sounds like we've got to pretty much commit to voting for the Democrats.
yeah. I don't understand what the state, like the Republicans are pushing for like zero income tax, and they have like no plan to pay for anything after that.
Right. It's
I
just
don't
gonna
quite-
it's just gonna pay for itself.
I don't
Right.
quite get, it's, you listen to the band, you got to
Yeah.
pay the cover. I mean, that's always what my philosophy
Yeah.
is. Nobody likes taxes, but you can't, like I said, you want to hear the music, you got to pay the band. That's the way it is.
We gotta grow up in this country.
We got 3 proposals on the ballot, and one is legalization of marijuana, recreational use of marijuana.
Mhm.
That I agree with 100%.
Yeah,
2
2 is the redistricting. They want to, have you ever seen the
Gerrymandering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
It looks like
Redraw
a
those.
real
Yep.
jigsaw puzzle in most cases.
Right.
This is going to make a grid if they get it.
Yeah.
And then the third one was the big
making
block.
voting easier.
Yeah, basically.
Going back to the straight party.
Right.
balloting.
Well, the vast majority of people have internet access now. You can vote for American Idol on your phone. You should be able to vote for your county commissioner. You should be able to vote for the president of the United States over your phone.
It would be a good thing.
Absolutely.
It will happen.
And if I have to pay a fee for that, I would. I would pay a fee for
I
that.
say go back to paper
Or go
because
straight back to paper.
Russia can't go to every ballot place. And
But I think if you were able to make it accessible for people to do it in their own homes, then they could research what they're going to vote on
Again, it
because
could still
they're
be
already
paper.
sitting.
So
Yeah, but if you're at a different place, the first thing you want to do is get out. If you're in the comfort of your own home, you can actually research what you're going to vote for and make a more educated guess by simply doing, even if you do a 5-minute Google search, you are more educated than you would be if you were to walk in and vote on something that you've never even heard of.
that depends on what Google wants you to see.
So-
Okay.
the nonpartisan, this is, Chrissy Whitmer and Deb Davinow.
Okay.
These 2 people are super important. They're nonpartisan, but these judges were appointed by Snyder.
Okay.
these judges will be
Elected.
fighting for civil rights and jobs.
Okay.
They're
So
nonpartisan.
it's super
and
important.
they're supported by them.
Yep. Super important that you go, and Sam Bagdinos
Yeah.
or whatever his name is very sharp. He's Harvard educated. He's
So
Good
is,
guy.
Okay.
Yale.
and Kavanaugh with a C, not a K.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, good to talk to you guys.
You too.
I feel like you're enjoying yourself. That's great.
Okay.
Y'all.
Yeah.
I'm tired. Just like a month.
We're actually doing a podcast on just about everything that you guys just
Well, I
talked
kind
about.
of
So.
hold her to and
Yeah.
knocked on her door and she did it.
I probably
Thanks again.
Yep.
Yep.
I completely forgot what we were talking about. And we
Uh,
lost all of our viewers, didn't we?
yeah, we did.
Oh well.
All one.
We'll get more.
Well,
Hey, one is important.
this will also, like, after it's all done, it'll be uploaded as like a regular video. So people can go back and just watch it.
Yeah. I like the unedited versions. I mean, I've made a couple of flops.
Get the whole thing.
And I've made a couple examples that were asinine of me. But, you know, I appreciate this because it shows the realness of everything. And it also shows, too, that yes, a stout Republican and a stout Democrat can get along. I've been friends with this man for, 6 years, 7 years now?
Yeah, it's been about that long.
And I mean, I live in his house now. I rent from him because I'm horrible with money and I can't buy my own house yet.
I thought you were a fiscal conservative.
I am fiscally. I am, but that doesn't negate the fact
Just
that
a
I'm
joke,
absolutely horrible
Just
with
a
money.
joke.
I know. I hate money. If I could live in a hut in the middle of the woods somewhere, I totally would.
Why shouldn't
Yes,
you be
I
able
would.
to?
What?
Why shouldn't you be able to?
Exactly. And that's where I have a problem with property taxes.
Yeah.
Like, let's get to the property taxes. So
Oh boy.
there's a lot of things that the property taxes pay into. Schools are a big one. And I'm not saying that we should stop funding for schools. But why don't we have a school tax instead of property taxes? Because you never will own your home. You will never own this house. Ever. You will pay it off. You will pay the bank off completely. However, if you don't make that $1,000 a year payment to the government,
Mm-hmm.
then men with guns are going to come by and they're going to take this house from you. Or actually, they're going to take you out of this house and then they're going to resell this house.
They're gonna auction it off for a fraction of what it's worth.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
the people can then, the new people that move in here can pay property taxes. That's where I have a problem.
And I
It's
think
because
that's
the five fingers of the free
I
market that
think
John
that's
Smith came up with, one of them was owning your property.
God, John Smith.
There's a lot of things that he did that were, one of which were the free hand of the free market. That if we got back to that,
While living with his mother and having her cater to him while he wrote the book.
okay, Edgar Allan Poe married both of his cousins and still an amazing writer. That doesn't mean anything.
It does.
No, it
Because
doesn't.
he's talking about free market capitalism, and yet in the meantime, he's basically a freeloading welfare bum. Make me a sandwich. Write my book.
Okay, but he doesn't negate the fact that he came up with some really great ideas for
Yeah.
free market capitalism.
Still smoking the same thing?
But yeah, the rich vanilla. No, and that's where I come up with. You should be able to own your house outright. You know, you buy a house, say for $100,000. You buy a house, you pay the bank, it's paid off 100%. You paid $100,000. Say you wrote a check for $100,000, and you gave it to the bank. Done right there. that house should be yours until you decide to tear it down, sell it.
Well, you should also be able to do
Whatever.
whatever you want.
You
but
should be able to do
To a
whatever you
point.
want to it.
to a point. I mean, so what you have with a lot of the restrictions, like let's say this neighborhood, for example. Now, one thing I saw up north when I was in the UP was people adding additions onto their homes,
Mm-hmm.
and it was mobile home parked next to house with roof and attachment. Basically, that was how they expanded their home. Was they just slapped the mobile home next to it, attached it to the house, and boom, that was the addition. Now, do
What's
I
wrong with that?
want?
If you have the
it's
property.
going to lower my property value, and you see that issue with like Phoenix, right? Phoenix had like zero regulations when it came
How would
to
that lower your property value?
because of what's next door. Now, should that lower?
Is that mobile home a meth home, or is there what?
they
why would
only
that
depreciate in value?
But everyone's house is either going to appreciate or not.
But a
And-
home, but an actual house can go up in value, whereas a mobile home only declines.
Okay, so
Plus, there's the visual appeal. If you're trying to sell your home, do you want to look outside your window and see that next door?
but then you have the choice to move. You have the choice to leave.
You do, but that also means if you're looking at the choice to move, then you're
If you
also,
live in an environment like here, you know we're 2 minutes from downtown Kalamazoo in Michigan. When he said UP earlier, that's the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. For those of you that don't know,
or Yoopers,
or the Yoopers,
Yoopers, eh?
which is pretty much the Canadian border. Actually, the Canadian border does run through the UP,
No, it doesn't.
the east side,
No, because you have
just on the
Lake
other
Superior.
side of Drummond Island,
Yeah,
and then it runs along the coast of Isle Royale too. But so like Lake Superior is like part of Canada too. Like
you're gonna
there's
have to take over in a minute because I gotta.
you got to pee.
Yes.
I got to pee too.
All right.
So you go first. It's your house.
All right. You keep this thing going.
Absolutely. Do we have any viewers?
Just
Go.
nope.
No, we don't. We don't got anybody. But that's
Yeah.
all right.
People are gonna watch this later though.
That's fine.
So,
I'm all right with that. No, getting back to his point when he comes back, if you live in a city, if you choose to live in a city, then yeah, you should be able to, or you should have to follow certain guidelines. For instance, like his example earlier about putting a mobile home on the side of your house as an expansion. Should that be right? You know, should you be able to do that when you're 15 feet from another house? No, I wouldn't necessarily appreciate that. However, if you live in a rural subdivision or not a subdivision, a rural area, like in the UP, there's like 15 people that live up there. It's an amazing place, beautiful. Especially if you're someone like me that likes to hunt and fish. You have more woods and lakes to hunt than anybody else. Then yeah, you should be able to do whatever you want to your property. And you should be able to own it outright. And I think you should be able to own it outright, period, no matter where you live. If you live in downtown Kalamazoo, like where we're at now, like he should be able to own this house outright. Once it's paid off, once the loan is paid off, obviously, then he should be able to do whatever he wants to this house. Obviously, you know, within the regulations of the city, and that's where the city needs to come up with the regulations or the guidelines that follow. But if, like, my dad owns 13 acres up in Newaygo, and he's not allowed to build a permanent structure up there. Now it's in the middle of the woods. There's the next neighbor, I think, is like a quarter of a mile away. But he's not allowed to put any structure on his house because of certain city guidelines.
Why can't he build a house on his property in the middle of nowhere? You should be able to do whatever he wants. I mean, he should be able to put, if he wants to cut down every tree on his property and
What about the
build
spotted
up,
owl?
that's fine. Well, and that's where the environmental thing comes in, and we're getting very detailed, but that's where
I don't even know.
that's
what you're
where
talking
I
about.
think that the federal government has kind of overstepped their bounds. Talking about owning your own property.
Yeah.
I think you're right as far as like here, like your house here, in 2 minutes from downtown Kalamazoo. You should be able to own this house outright and be able to do whatever you want within the guidelines of the city. Now the city needs to come up with
The city has a lot of fucking guidelines.
they do. It's freaking horrible. I've gotten 2 tickets for parking in front of my own house. Well, his house that I rent. That's asinine to me. I grew up in the country, so I guess I'm not used to it. That's probably why I've gotten so many tickets. But
And the upside, you do have your own driveway. It's annoying because it's not like side by side, but still.
it's still stupid. But what I was just talking to these guys is like my dad owns 13 acres up in Newaygo, and he's not allowed to build any permanent structure on his property because of city guidelines. He
So
lives
that's when
in
you
the
do
middle
the
of
little
nowhere.
house with the wheels. It's one of those loopholes that you can get away with.
True, but why should there be a loophole? He's not in city limits.
He's not.
He's in Newaygo County, but he's not in Newaygo City.
But the little house movement, the tiny house movement, that's where they've been able to.
But he owns 13 acres. If he had the money, why shouldn't he be able to build a 13-acre mansion on it if he wanted to? It would be dumb, and I'm throwing out a hypothetical out there. But
But if he had the money, I mean, if he was wealthy enough, he could actually do whatever he wanted because he'd just go to it and say, "Hey, change this law, and I'll contribute X amount of dollars to your campaign."
no, that's wrong.
It is wrong. It is.
That's bribery, and you should go to jail for that.
So basically, the regulations, in my opinion, are only for people who.
Oh, you want to use my phone?
Nah. She on there?
No, I don't think so. Oh, I need that
I think we got our viewer back.
one. I'm not sure. Yeah, I have a friend request. No, that's where I disagree with the property taxes. I think that property taxes should be turned into whatever taxes property taxes go into, like schools.
I don't think
Like
we
there
have
should be a
lost our
school
viewer.
tax.
I think YouTube is all messed up
Why?
because he's commenting. I don't know what he's just said. I'm sorry, I didn't have time to read it, but somebody's commenting and it says we have like 0 viewers. So there really could be like 10 people out there and we don't even know.
That would be awesome.
Thanks,
No,
YouTube.
I do not have your wife saved on my phone. I'm sorry. So sorry, Sarah. If you have her number memorized, which I don't, I don't have my fiance's number memorized. No judgment. I'm gonna have to go do the same thing that you're doing. So keep
All
the
right.
viewers happy while I'm gone.
I'm going to talk about the UP for a bit.
Yes, do it.
Okay, so when I was up in the Upper Peninsula, and there's a town called Mucinene, and right off the coast in Lake Superior is this big island that apparently a bunch of people lived on until a couple decades ago, and there's a big deal where the federal government was coming in and basically jacking up the taxes on the land, forcing people off the island. And there was a bunch of people who were like, "Hey, we're 3-4 generations in. This is our home. How are you? Like, I can't pay this. My, hunting, trapping, maybe some fishing is the only income." And basically, it was people who were self-sufficient. So they're getting these insane tax bills And a lot of people finally just decided to hand the land back over to the federal government, as opposed to being forcibly evicted. But there was one guy who held out for the longest period of time, and uh, that turned out to not be the whole story. And this was the story that I got from a guy from a local brewery up there who had a wall dedicated to one of the final people to live on the island. And I asked him who this guy was, and that's how I got the whole story. But anyways, come back to Kalamazoo, and I'm telling somebody about this who is familiar with the UP. Oh, hello, new viewers. I guess we have 2 people on now. What ended up happening was the land on the island. Hey, what's up? Clint the Frozen Backy Blender. Woo, what a fancy name. We're fancy up in here.
Oh, oh.
That's alcohol abuse. Jeez. So, what ended up happening is originally the land on this island was a 150-year lease, which I thought was insane. The fact that the federal government would lease out this land for a period of time to where generation 3 and 4 take over the land, and all of a sudden these people that they don't know about, have never heard of, come and say, oh, hey, you need to re-sign this lease that you don't know about. And
What
but-
island are you talking about?
the one off of Munising,
Munising?
that one. Yeah. Munising.
Yes. You're
And,
talking about the residents?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how it turned out that there was like this lease that they were just like, what the hell? And
Yep.
then they're like trying to,
This happened on several
oh
places.
God.
And it's that is federal theft, in my opinion. When you live in a house for 2, 3, 4 generations, and then all of a sudden some tax guy comes by and says, "Oh yeah, hey, by the way, you need to sign this lease and pay us
I
another
didn't sign it.
X
No,
number
but your
of months."
great granddaddy did.
Yeah, no, that is theft, and that is where that is downright theft. And yeah, I'd fight tooth and nail. You know, you had the guy at downtown Grand Rapids, where I'm from. I'm from GR, Grand Rapids, about hour north of here. There was a guy that lived in downtown GR, and this was this family's house. I mean, they lived there back when GR was nothing but farm fields.
Yeah.
And the YMCA and I think Big Boy. Yeah,
Wow.
This is what's wrong.
That's classy.
This is what's wrong with our country. Is you have a gym, you have a world class gym, that opened up in right smack dab in the heart of downtown, and it's huge. And then Big Boy bought some property that, like, this guy butted his property butted right up next to him. He refused to sell the property to YMCA or to Big Boy because they were going to turn his house into a parking lot. And he was like, I'm not tearing down my house. So
Is
they
that what
built the parking lot around his house.
Well,
and
he didn't own the land.
and
You should be able to do with your land whatever you want.
and both sides are right. Both sides are right. But he turned down everything that they offered him like 5 times more than what the property value was worth, just because they wanted to clear out this house. Because for 2 reputable businesses to have some old house that's sitting in the middle of the parking lot doesn't look all that appealing. And that's sure. However, you've had instances of people throughout this country that have been kind of, I don't want to necessarily say forced out at gunpoint, but forced out of their house because businesses have moved in. That's where I have a problem with major corporations, because they feel because they have money that they can just take whatever they want. because of aesthetics.
I am smoking Da Vinci blend Dan tobacco. Anyway,
Now I'm just gonna keep knocking my pipe out on your porch.
I have a broom. My porch, I can do what I want.
No, you know, I went up to the UP about a week before you did, and obviously, you know, I watched your dog while you were
Mhm.
gone. And you watched my pets while I was gone. And I think that's where the biggest problem, because I went up there and we went camping, me and my fiance. We went camping for a week up there, and we found a campsite that was remote. It was right on a lake. Sat by a campfire every night, and that was one of the happiest moments I've had in a long time. And I think that's where the biggest problem with, I don't want to necessarily say this country, but just sporadically throughout the world is we need to get back to nature. And you know, in a broad spectrum of things, I think more people need to hunt, fish, garden, you know, live simply. I'm happier when I'm hunting or fishing than I ever am sitting in my cubicle. And
Isn't most people happier outside of a cubicle?
well, yeah, but happier doing what? You know, happier going to.
Anything other than being in a
But
cubicle?
no, happier going to the bar and getting shit faced because they realize that they have to go to their cubicle again tomorrow.
Mm. True.
You know, I mean, you have a lot of people Friday night will go and get shit faced Friday night, wake up with a hangover Saturday, and then go drinking out Saturday night and just kind of completely forget about their weekend because they know that their life is miserable and they hate it and they know that they have to go back to it on Monday morning.
Well, I think there's some people that are really like wired for the cubicle life.
And it comes down to you know, your own choice. I don't have to work in a cubicle. I can quit my job, go do something else. What I don't know. That's the reason. And people hate change. And I can speak from personal experience because, you know, like I would love to move back up to GR, and I would love to be able to live in a log cabin and hunt fish all day. And I'm sure there is something out there to where I can some sort of income job or career that I can do that would, you know, that could make that lifestyle happen. But I'm scared of change, and I'll be the first one to admit that. But I've seen over the years that it is harder and harder for that to happen because I believe that more and more people feel that it is required. The only way for you to live is to work for a big organization. You know, instead of going in and working for yourself, you go in and do something else.
Well, going back to public schools, isn't that what schools are really like designing kids to
Absolutely.
eventually do as an adult is work for? I mean, you're in school, you're part of an institution, and then they hammer you to follow the rules and everything for that institution.
Mhm.
Yeah, not free nuns. Okay.
I'm gonna try something different. I didn't
Yeah.
like the smell of that. Anyways, public schools.
So it's like the rare individual who I wasn't too fond of that yesterday.
I'm gonna try French vanilla.
C'est la vie.
That one.
C'est la
You
vie.
said that one. I don't speak French.
I don't either, but I had somebody else do a review on it.
From America. I speak American.
So I think it's the rare individual, and a lot of times it's like the problem kids, the ones that don't do good in school, that end up finding their own way. And
Yep.
you know, how many successful entrepreneurs, innovators did poorly in school. Einstein, for example, flunked math. But
Didn't he? He failed out of school like in like 8th grade or something, didn't he?
I don't think so.
I thought he failed out of school. I thought he never even graduated.
I know that he flunked math at one point, but
Which
you look at what's his name that started Facebook,
yeah,
even Steve Jobs didn't finish school. But in college, it was because they were actually pursuing what they were interested in at the time, and they stuck with it.
but that comes down to personal motivation.
Mhm.
You know, like I'll use myself as an example, only because I see it. I see it in me, whereas like it boils down to work ethic. So I'm not gonna sit here and say I hate my life, so therefore Bill Gates needs to give me money. No, Bill Gates did what he could. Steve Jobs did what he could to make the life that they wanted. Now, they don't owe me anything. They don't owe you anything. I'm not going to sit here and say, you know, I'm just too lazy to strive for something that I truly want. So I'm just going to force rich people to give me their money. And that's the movement that, at least personally, that I've seen over the last 5-10 years. Especially
with the what do they call that?
welfare.
No, well, kind of getting into that. There's the universal basic income idea
Uh-huh.
that's kind of getting pushed.
Which has failed everywhere that it's tried.
I don't know about
Chicago
that.
Chicago tried to give their resident inner city Chicago, I think it was like a 5 or 10 block radius. Last year, they were going to do it for a year. I think they were going to give their each household $1,000 a month, or each resident of this particular neighborhood $1,000 a month. They couldn't even do it for a year because they ran out of funding.
Well, that's funding. I mean,
You kind of need funding to fund.
you do,
people.
and it was probably a stupid idea for a city to try to do something like that on its own.
But Australia tried to do it too.
Did they?
I think it was
No.
Australia or Europe.
I want to say like
Somewhere in Europe.
the Netherlands,
So-
maybe.
Somewhere, yeah, whatever. Europe.
But I don't know, okay, so universal healthcare, right? One of the things that came up in an interview with Jordan Peterson was they're talking about universal healthcare, and one of the things they said, Jordan Peterson said, was that the number of people who try to become entrepreneurs in Canada statistically is higher than what you would find in the United States. And a lot of it comes down to you can leave your job, you can try to start a business, and you don't have the fear of no longer having health care. So, like, me and you work for organizations that provide our health care, right? But if we try to have something, our own business on the side, or we leave those jobs for those businesses that we have created, we no longer have
But
that support.
But you
of
have to
having
look at
healthcare.
see, universal health care is a great idea. And it really is.
We
The
already
problem
kind of
is,
have it.
the problem is, though, is what health care are you talking about? Because
Sure.
Canada, you break your arm in Canada, covered 100%. Great.
Yeah.
Good on you. You get diagnosed with terminal cancer, you're fucked.
No, you still get treatment.
You don't get the same treatment that you do in the States.
Well, because you buy it in the States.
But
and
how-
you become a
but see-
priority because you're buying it. As opposed to everyone.
In Canada, where you have to wait 6 months for an MRI.
See, Jim Carrey was just on Bill Maher a week or two ago, and he grew up in Canada. He's Canadian. He grew up there, and he was just like, yeah, all this stuff that you hear about was
He's
like,
also Jim Carrey. everybody from the southern tip of Florida to the northern tip of Ontario has heard of Jim Carrey.
Yeah,
He's famous. You can't use famous people for
he
that.
wasn't famous when he was using the Canadian healthcare system. That's the point. He was saying, "Hey, I grew up in it. I had my experience with it. This is." And it was no different. What
Has he
saw
ever
was
been?
that
Has he ever been diagnosed with cancer or some sort of terminal or serious ailment?
he was crazy.
He still is. He's actually gotten more crazy. I like Jim Carrey. I like the old Jim Carrey. The new Jim Carrey with his paintings and everything he's just gotten weird.
I didn't know that he was painting.
Yeah. Bunch of anti-Trump stuff. That's like, I mean, I don't know. He's jumped on that anti-Trump socialist bandwagon, and he's gone downhill.
Okay. We might have to stop this.
Who's that?
My mom. Well, this was fun. Maybe we can start it in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Again.